right, ladies and gentlemen, the moment you've been waiting for is finally here. Welcome to Flowers with the T, the digital book club where the pages turn and the discussion flow. I am Avila Lloyd, and I'm thrilled to be joined by my beautiful co-host. I'm going to first start off with a filmmaker, children's book author, and producer straight out of LA, Los Angeles. Ladies and gentlemen, Andrea Walker Williamson. What's up, though?
Hey, how you doing? How you doing? What's up?
Awesome. And we have the beautiful Lee Hadris, an up-and-coming author from Cape Town, South Africa. What up, though, Lee?
Hey.
Awesome. This is our very first podcast episode. Round of applause. Round of applause. Didn't you know? Didn't you know? And we're diving deep into the critically acclaimed book, The Devil's Half-Acre, by author Kristengreen. Now, even though we're recording this episode during the month of March, we want to make one thing clear. Our conversation on Black culture isn't limited to Juneteenth or Black History Month. It is something that we need to discuss and keep in our hearts throughout the year, every day. So, this isn't your average book review podcast. We're going to be sharing our thoughts using two very important tools, flowers and tea. We each will offer our unique perspective on The Devil's Half-Acre with these two symbolic elements to help support our review, but also to promote adult literacy. If you're interested in resources committed to adult learning, helpful information will be shown in the description to assist someone in your community who are seeking to develop their skills in reading and writing. So grab your cup of tea and your flowers of choice. The club is now in session. Okay, before we dive into our book review, let's get to know The Devil's Half-Acre author, Kristengreen. She's a storyteller with a keen eye for uncovering hidden history and untold stories. Kristen is a journalist turned author, and her passion for history is evident in her research and the raw truth she brings to light. Now, with that in mind, The Devil's Half-Acre is a deeply enriching read that can offer valuable insights into the struggles and resiliency of those who live through the difficult chapter in Black history. Enjoy the journey and take your time as you read it. So let the review begin. Who'd like to go first?
I would like to go first, if that's okay.
Okay, Drea, the stage is yours.
All right, so I'm going to start by saying I didn't really look into who Kristengreen was until after I finished the book. The book itself did read more as more like a case study, rather than something where I could of someone who was emotionally attached to it, to characters. I do enjoy the fact that she followed Mary Lumpkin and Robert Lumpkin, and even though we didn't have like a diary of Mary, she used the accounts of other enslaved people to recreate a world. I appreciate the fact that we were able to reimagine living during that time, and once I did see that Kristen lives in Virginia, it made a lot more sense to me, because the context of where most of the account is coming from is in Richmond, Virginia, where the height of slavery really was, heavy. So we were provided a context of where enslaved people were being sold, taken away, and displaced. And especially when we talking about infants and a mother, like a woman not having any authority or reproductive rights, any say so, especially being a Black woman myself. And it was hard for, when I read it, I tried to remove the fact that I'm a Black woman and that this is a sad history of some of the women in my own ancestry. But it's hard to not see yourself in this book. It's hard to not place yourself within the realm of these stories, because she repeatedly referred to people who came in contact with Mary Lumpkin and people whose story intersected with hers. That's one of the things that I did appreciate that Kristen did. Though the one thing that I did not appreciate was that it felt as if she did not talk to anyone who currently is black in America. It felt like it was a lot of historians giving accounts, but this fool. It was a lot of historians giving accounts, but they had no attachment emotionally. And that part, it was really like I was reading an investigative report the whole duration. And I've read about torture of the enslaved. I'm not gonna lie. I've seen little chains. I've seen, and I'm like, oh my God, they had chains this small for someone to have created chains that small. Yeah, if that's an infant, that's a newborn. But my particular review, and I know I just took a long way on the same street. My particular review is so complex because I'm like, even though I appreciated that she followed these people and that she used these people as a case study, I felt like a little more could have been done to create an emotional connection within the parameters of her as a writer and a researcher and a historian in that way. You know what I'm saying?
Who you think was her target?
I've got an opinion on that. Look, this book was not written for black women. This book was written for white people.
Yeah.
It was a way to educate white people about what had happened during slavery times. But for black women, I'm sorry, I didn't see any of that. For you guys, maybe, I don't know, it just wasn't a page turner for me. There's so much details that could have been put in, and there's so much more information she could have had to help create that emotion within it. This was just written. It was as if she was taking different kinds of information and just putting it into a book. I myself didn't enjoy it too much, just because she's a white woman writing about slavery for white people.
Yeah.
There's nothing for us over here. It is not written for black women at all. The book was.
I agree with that.
I'm sorry. It's just
I totally agree with that. I like the jasmine flower. That's my flower. My flower is that Mary Lumpkin's story resonated enough with her for us to be able to say her name. It tapped Kristengreen enough for her to give this woman a voice, to give her lifestyle. It reminded me of Harriet Jacobs. It reminded me of so many, like 12 Years a Slave. It reminded me of so many other narratives. I will give her a jasmine flower or two because of that, because we're able to talk about Mary, and without Mary saying something herself. We saw Lucy. I was like, this is crazy. And then I was like, what happened with those children? We really couldn't define where because these children may have just passed and forgotten about their blackness because it was a better world. The world was changing. They had to, you know what I'm saying? They had to detach themselves. But I was able to identify a lot. So for me, that was the T.
I'm going to be honest with you. What makes this book stand out to me is how Green's attention to detail does bring history alive. When I read the book, it was like pulling me in. It was like, I mean, this can actually be a TV's miniseries, in my opinion. People don't know that I'm a late discovery adoptee. The truth about my biological roots. But in a twist of fate, about 5 years ago, after turning 45, I took the ancestry DNA test and got the results back and discovered that I am the daughter of a man that I never knew. I see a photo of a man who I resemble to a T. His complexion, his nose, his eyes, similar to my own. His children, my biological siblings, resemble me. I was shocked. I was hurt. Because after receiving my results, I immediately asked my adopted mother, who I consider my mother, about these results and the people connected to them, and she had confirmed that, yeah, I was adopted when I was a young child. Part of my DNA results stated that I mentioned that I'm French Canadian, Native American, something that stopped me at my tracks, and I'm like, well, who in my ancestry who is French Canadian, Native American? And when I met my biological family, they gave me the full family tree. And as someone who's very interested in ancestral archaeology, I was digging. I was like, oh man, this gives me some connection to my roots. And after doing the research and digging into every person to confirm the accuracy, because there was some inaccuracy in the family tree. However, the accurate information had revealed that I am related to a French Canadian pioneer, Francis Bourbonnais, from the village of Bourbonnais, Illinois. Reading the book, The Devil's Half-Acre, it does give a historical exploration of the powerful family story that intersects with my own, bringing together history, identity, and a whole new understanding of what it means to trace your roots. That is what I got from it. Now, here is my con. Okay. As a Black woman coming to terms with my adoption and the complexity of identity have been an ongoing journey. Painfully, as I read this book, I was shocked to see how much of my own questions about heritage, family, secrets, emotional pain, and abuse, and a sense of belonging mirrored the themes Green explores inside this book. Her deep dive into the history of the South and the impact of slavery and the economy here in the U.S. But it goes beyond our borders. There are times when the wealth of historical context in this book can feel overwhelming. For some readers, as I have mentioned in the disclaimer, it does slow down the flow of the story, but as impressive as her details may explore, it might come a bit too much for some readers. It's very graphic. I mean, I got emotional just and angry as I was hearing, but this is what happened. These are the things that happened during that time. But as you had mentioned, Andrea, it was more from her perspective as a white woman, as a researcher, about what I'm going through today as a Black woman. Seeing that the things that happened many centuries ago that impacted Black people, and I'm saying Black culture, I'm not just talking about Black Americans, but I'm going beyond into Africa. The torture, the slave raids, all of that happened, it still impacts us today. But to go into the deeper dive, while the main characters are engaging and multidimensional, there are some secondary figures in the book that feels flat. In my opinion, it was a bit flat. As you had mentioned, Andrea, their motivations were somewhat underdeveloped, which can make it difficult to connect with them as deeply as you might with others in a story. These characters, though important to the plot, don't always have the same depth. There were moments where the pacing feels a little uneven, where linger with a bit too long in introspection or in the building of the historical context. Okay? After a while, I was like, I slowed down. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I did. I'm glad I wasn't the only one that saw that, Lee, because I was like, man, it got a little slowed down. In the beginning, it was like, yes, I can see this on TV. And then after a while, I was like, all right. I'm like, please forgive me, ladies. I kind of put the book down a bit. So if you're someone who thrives on fast-paced storytelling, you might find these lower sections a bit jarring. It's a book that demands patience and a deep appreciation for the history it conveys. Tea of choice for me is the Kenya purple tea.
Okay.
I will have more about this tea in the description. I won't talk about it. It's all here, but I've always been drawn to the stories buried beneath the surface. So that meant that as I have mentioned, I received my family tree and I was like, yes, I'm connected with people that look like me. I love my adopted family. And this book opened my eyes to something that I have always suspected. My flower of choice was Yorisha Oshun. I think about the young lady Sarah Forbes Beneda, a West African princess who was the victim of the slave raids of Africa. She became an orphan and enslaved, and then later gifted to the Queen of England to escape execution. So here it is, a princess who her origins, her history was taken from her. Her name went from Ina, and I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly, please forgive me, into Sarah Forbes. It makes me think about myself, like, now I'm finding out that I'm adopted. It thinks about my origins. Family secrets, how we need to communicate better as a community. Why we should know our roots, especially as Black people. Knowing the history of what we went through So Kristengreen's book does bring the forefront and brutal reality of people like Sarah during the American South, but it's a reminder of how the system of slavery wasn't just confined to America. As I did my own research after reading this book, I mean, in my opinion, Kristengreen did not dig enough for me about the history of slavery. When she spoke about the history of slavery in Africa, to me, it was like, that's it?
Yeah.
It was like, okay, yeah, this is what happened, whatever. And I was like, I want to know more. But as I dug into the depths, slavery was a global system with far-reaching consequences, shaping not only the lives of the enslaved, but also the trajectory of entire nations and empires in Africa. I mean, many people talk about the Europeans, but there were people who looked like us that profited from this. They were part of they orchestrated the slave raids, and they have the enslaved, and there were people who were executed. They didn't make it. In my opinion, the Western world and the history, but the way she explained it to me was often sanitizing. It was sanitized. It wasn't really deep. But again, we don't know what her focus is. I would love to have her on this podcast. I would like us to talk to her, or her to talk about that, because it's the yellow sunflowers that I'm choosing is a symbolic of the endurance and the strength of those who survived the horrors of slavery and forced displacement, a story of survival. But those who made it through the transatlantic slave, but however, a community of people who endured so much loss and yet carried a piece of Africa with them into this country, America, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. It is painful but necessary exploration of Black history and the current level of respect that we have today towards one another in a divided American economy.
I just want to say that she mentions in her author note that she did a lot of research over a number of years to get this book as accurate as possible, right? But in my opinion, she could have done so much better for it. It felt like it was all over the place. We were hearing within the same chapters, we were hearing different stories. She could have done so much better. It was definitely written by a journalist. It didn't flow, in my opinion. I mean, she did good, and I'm very happy that she says that she made an effort, she did her research, but could have been done so much better. And as I said earlier, it was definitely made for white people rather than Black people. When I first started reading this book, I skipped the prologue and I skipped the author's note and I went straight into the book. And as I was reading it, not gonna lie, it took me very long to read because I kind of got, I won't say bored, but I will say like disinterested. The book, it didn't flow, like I said, and I just felt like there was so much details that she could have put in there that she just missed completely. And then when I went back and I read the author's note, she states in there, and I'm quoting, she says, learning about the treatment of them could enable Americans to confront the complex questions of what it means to be a Black woman in America. Now, if you read that sentence, she's literally just saying, hey, I'm writing this book for white people to understand what slavery was about for Black women. But, come on, man. This book could have been...
Right, you're right.
You know, the way that I would have loved her to write it is in both perspectives. The perspective of a Black woman and the perspective of a white. I mean, you're telling me that ancestors didn't pass over stories to their offsprings and such? I mean, come on. We all know the stories. She could have done so much more research and then gotten both perspectives and put it in the book. So much stuff that she could have written about and made it so much better. What I also wish that she had done was go more into detail about the race within the book itself. I mean, she says that Mary Lupkin is multiracial. Now, in the book, it also states that the white men preferred more fair-skinned women, right? And that is so accurate. I mean, I've read about and heard about it so many times. But here's where she could have done so much with this. She could have written about how that fact itself caused so much aggravation within the black culture, within the black cultures. I mean, how many times have you women heard about how certain blacks of certain skin colors or the darker skin colors hated on more fair skin just because they were chosen over them? There was so much story she could have written about. There was so much stuff that she missed. This book was, it pissed me off because of what it could have been. Just my opinion. However, I do like that she very vaguely explained that young women that just start puberty, ages 13 or so, gets sold off to men 20, 30 years their senior to have their kids. It's very much accurate, but again, so much more you could have written about. And what I feel could have been a real page turner is how black women resisted when they were sold off. Sorry, I'm trying to think of my words here. I'm sure you ladies have heard also, it's always been a fight. You know, you can never, or you've barely gotten people that just give off their kids as is. No problems at all. You understand? So, again, a whole topic she could have done more with, but she didn't. The book was all over the place. The book was just these very subtle pieces. Maybe it's just me because the stories that I have heard and read about is a lot more detail orientated, but she just touched the surface of what could have been, in my opinion. Okay, so she also indicates that at the age of like 5 or so, the little girls are sent to the kitchens to be taught everything that the older women would do, correct? But again, so much more she could have done with that. Give us more details on how and what happens if they don't do what they are told. You get? And I mean, in chapter 1 alone, it was boring, in my opinion. It was, every detail that she gave was just so subtle. It was too protected. That's again why I say this book was written for white people. It wasn't written for us. I mean, I was busy reading it and I was just like, yeah, that happened, but there's so much more to that. I mean, this is just like, the book educates white people about what had happened back in the day and how blacks did, but it gives nothing else about how serious the situation was. I mean, yeah, it's serious. It's a very serious topic. But there's so much details that she missed. She could have done so much with it. And the worst part about the whole book is the fact that she kept on writing probably and most likely too. And there was too much perhaps this happened, perhaps that happened. Or we don't know the exact details. It makes the book less authentic. If she really wanted to write it in such a way where she doesn't really know everything, write it like it's fiction. You know, put the details in there of the slavery, but write it like it's fiction. That way it's your opinions coming into the book, rather than you going, this probably happened, but I'm not really sure. You get me? So, overall, my tea of choice is an apple cinnamon spice tea. The reason for this is because when you first start drinking it, you're like, this is a very, very good taste. That's not that good. And as for my flower, I give it a red rose. The reason for this is because it starts off really beautiful. It starts off as something that you want to look at and you want to be proud of. and then it dies.
That's deep.
So that's my opinion, ladies. I don't know if you want to disagree or agree with me, but that's my opinion. She did good with what she had, but she didn't have enough information, hence the probablys, and might have been whatever. But again, it could have been done a lot better. But otherwise, I'd say give it a read for anyone that wants to. Just go ahead and give it a read. There's a lot of things that you can learn about the book. I mean, I didn't know about Mary Lumpkin, not gonna lie. I didn't know about her until I read the book. So, I mean, there's that. But at the end of the day, for me, I feel like so much more she could have done with it. But yeah.
Okay.
At the end of the day, I mean, could have been judged on the information that she would have given. You know, like if she had potentially gone into more detail, I mean, she could have been flagged, you know. Black women could have completely disgraced her because of the information that she's giving. They could have been like, well, you can't say because you're not there, or this is not culture, kind of thing. So I mean, I guess with considering her circumstances, she did pretty good.
I have a couple of things based on what you guys just said, actually. The first thing, I didn't say what my tea was outside of like the tea of the book. Her tea would be hibiscus tea, and I feel like because other cultures pick it up and it gets translated into whatever, it becomes homocha tea, it becomes all these other things. It's good for you, and we all pick it up and make it our own. But I will actually Lee made up a lot of good points that I did not think of to say in my review that I still want to say, and then you said a lot of things that resonated with me that I did not touch on as well. I want to acknowledge the fact that we didn't look at men as a commodity. Men were used as a commodity throughout the historical context of what she gave in these accounts, but she didn't. It kind of, I think, even though she brought up these points, it laid flat. We looked a lot at the women in the story, but we did not look at the black men in the story. The fact that sometimes they would have to be naked. She said it, but we didn't get nothing else. They would be stripped down. They would be touched and emasculated repeatedly. Their women were sold off. Their babies were stripped from them a lot of times when they were asleep, when they were working, distracted, whatever. So it didn't just happen to the women, it also happened to the men.
I mean, it is. I mean, and we need to be reminded. She's a visionary, and she's a filmmaker, she's a producer. So, I mean, this is no joke. And this is why I want to have an interview with you, because you have some amazing projects that's coming up, and that will be on the Rhymers Corner podcast. So yes, as part of you're actually episode 1, and ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot that she's bringing to the table. Thank you, ladies, so much for joining, everyone else for joining us and listen to our thoughts and reflections on the book. This doesn't have to be yours. So again, thank you to the amazing co-hosts Andrea Walker Williamson and Lee Hadrick. Your insights and perspectives always make the conversation more richer. And again, this podcast is to promote literacy. So, but before we go, let's get excited for the next book club pick. Lee, you take the mic on this. Do the honors.
Okay. So the next book that we are going to be reviewing is called The Midnight Library. This book is a book about a woman who is in deep sadness and depression and tries to commit suicide. But instead of dying, she ends up in a world in between life and death, the Midnight Library, where she is surrounded by books with stories that could have happened had she made different decisions. And this book is just basically about how society is never fulfilled with anything in their lives, how they'll find a problem with every single decision that they make. So yeah.
Who's the author? Can you tell us the author?
Oh, sure know how to pronounce the surname. Haig.
That's what I'm saying. Haig.
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 Yeah.
Haig.
Yeah.
Sorry, man. But this is ta-da! Your book is next. Next and so be ready for our talks and our take on your book, Matt. And The Devil's Half-Acre is a must-read in my opinion. Lee had, that's the point. I mean, you may have your take on it. Would like to hear your thoughts and comments. As always, we encourage you to take a moment to put down your phones and pick up a book. Share your thoughts with us on social media and let us know the pros and cons of your take on The Devil's Half-Acre. We would love to hear you. So thanks again for being part of the Flowers with the Tea family. We see you next time. And remember, baby, bring me some flowers, baby, with my tea. Until next time, happy reading, everyone. Take care and keep blooming. Deuces.
Yes.